By midday, with the sun overhead in a cloudless sky and the wind died away to nothing, the grasslands lying south of Theed between the Naboo capital city and the Gungan swamp lay empty and still. Heat rose off the grasslands in a soft shimmer, and it was so quiet that from 100 meters away, the chirp of birds and the buzz of insects could be heard as if they were settled close by. Then the Trade Federation Army's bubble-nosed transports and armor-wrapped tanks roared onto the rolling meadows, skimming the tall grasses in gleaming waves of bright metal. It was quiet in the swamps as well, the perpetual twilight hushed and expectant beneath the vast canopy of limbs and vines, the surface of the mire as smooth and unbroken as glass, the reeds and rushes motionless in the windless air. Here and there, a water bug jumped soundlessly from place to place, stirring puddles to life in the wake of its passing, bending blades of grass like springboards. Birds swooped and banked in bright flashes of color, darting from limb to limb. Small animals crept from cover to drink and feed, eyes bright, noses twitching, senses alert. Then the Gungan army surfaced in a rippling of murky water and a stream of bubbles. Lop-eared heads popping up like corks. First one, then another, and finally hundreds and eventually thousands. Both on the plain and in the swamp, the small animals raced back into hiding, the birds took wing, and the insects went to ground. Astride their Kadu, the Gungans rode from their concealment with armor strapped to their amphibious bodies and weapons held at the ready. They carried long-hafted energy spears and metal-handled ball slings for long-distance fighting and energy shields for close combat. The Kadu shook themselves as they reached dry ground, shedding the swamp water from their smooth skins, eyes picking out the solid patches of ground as their riders urged them on. Numbers swelling as they reached the fringes of the swamp, the Gungans began to form up in ranks of riders that stretched away as far as the eye could see. As the first wave rode clear, the swamp boiled anew with the appearance of Famba, huge, four-legged lizards with long necks and tails and massive, scaly bodies. The Famba bore shield generators atop their broad backs, machines that when linked would activate a force field to protect the Gungan soldiers against Trade Federation weaponry. The Famba lumbered heavily beneath their loads, necks craning from side to side as their drivers prodded them impatiently. Jar Jar Binks rode with them at the head of his new command, wondering what it was he was supposed to do. Mostly, he believed, he was supposed to stay out of the way. Certainly the other generals and even his own subordinate officers had made it clear that this was what they preferred. Boss Nass might think it clever to make him a general in the Gungan army, but the career officers found it less amusing. General Seal, who was commander-in-chief, grunted sourly at Jar Jar on being informed of his new position and told him to set a good example for his people and die well. Jar Jar had responded to all of this by keeping a low profile until the march out of the swamp began, and then he had assumed his required position at the head of his command. He had gotten barely 100 meters after emerging from concealment when he had fallen off his Kadu. No one had bothered to stop to help him climb back on, and so now he was riding somewhere in the middle of his troops.
"This seems very bad,"
he kept whispering to himself as he rode with the others through the marshy haze. Slowly, steadily, the Gungan army cleared the tangle of the swamps and moved out onto the open grasslands where the Trade Federation army was already waiting. Anakin Skywalker hunkered down in the shadows of a building directly across from the main hangar of the Naboo Starfleet in the city of Theed. It was quiet here as well, the bulk of the battle droids dispatched to the field to deal with the Gungan army, the remainder scattered throughout the city in patrols and on perimeter watch. Nevertheless, tanks crowded the plaza fronting the hangar complex, and a strong contingent of battle droids warded the Naboo fleet. Seizing control of the starfighters was not going to be easy. Anakin glanced over at those with him. Padme, dressed as a handmaiden, crouched with Irte beside the Jedi, waiting for Captain Panaka's command to get into position on the other side of the square. Sabe, the decoy queen, and her handmaidens wore battle dress, loose fitting and durable, with blasters strapped to their sides. R2-D2 blinked silently from behind them in the company of 20-odd Naboo officers, guards, and pilots, all armed and ready. It seemed to the boy like a pathetically small number of fighters to carry the day, but it was all they had. At least Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan were talking again. They had begun doing so on the journey in from the swamps, a few worlds here, a few there, exchanging comments guardedly, testing the waters. Anakin had listened carefully, more attuned to the nuances of their conversation than others could be, hearing in the inflection of their voices more than simply the words spoken. After a time, when the words had healed enough of the breach that they felt comfortable again, there were smiles, brief and almost sad, but clear in their purpose. The Jedi were old friends, and the relationship that of father and son. They did not want to toss it all away over a single disagreement. Anakin was thankful for that, especially since the disagreement in question was over him. Padme had spoken to him as well, joining him for a few moments as they approached the city through the forests east, her smile banishing all his doubts and fears in a moment's time. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner," she said, apologizing for hiding her identity. "I know it was a surprise." "It's okay," he said, shrugging bravely. "I guess knowing I'm a queen makes you feel differently about me, doesn't it?" she asked. "I guess, but that's okay, just so you still like me, because I still like you." He looked over at her hopefully. "Of course, Annie. Telling you who I really am doesn't mean my feelings for you have changed. I was the same person before, whether you knew the truth about me or not." He thought about it a moment. "I suppose." He brightened. "So I guess my feelings for you shouldn't be any different now either." She moved away, smiling broadly back at him, and just at that moment he felt 10 meters tall. So now he was at peace with himself about the Jedi and Padme, but was beset with new concerns. What if something happened to them during the fight ahead? What if they were hurt? Or even... He couldn't bring himself to finish the thought. Nothing bad would happen to them, that was all. He wouldn't let it. He glanced at them, kneeling in silence at the edge of the plaza, and promised himself he would keep them safe no matter what. That would be his job. His mouth tightened with determination as he made his pledge. "Once we get inside, Annie, you find a safe place to hide until this is over," Qui-Gon advised suddenly, bending close, almost as if he could read the boy's mind. "Sure," Anakin promised. "And stay there," the Jedi Master added firmly. Across the way, Panaka and his contingent of fighters were in position now, placing the tanks and battle droids in a crossfire with Padme's group. Padme produced a small glow rod and flashed a coded signal to Panaka across the square. All around Anakin, weapons slid free of holsters and fastenings, and safeties were released. Then, Panaka's fighters opened up on the battle droids, blasters shattering their metal bodies in a hail of laser fire. Other droids wheeled about in response and began exchanging fire, drawn toward the source of the conflict and away from Padme's group. Qui-Gon came to his feet. "Stay close," Qui-Gon whispered to him. A moment later, the boy was running with the Jedi, Padme, Irte, R2-D2, and their Naboo contingent of soldiers and pilots toward the open door of the hangar. Jar Jar sat tall astride his Kadu, having regained his composure and resumed his position at the head of his troop. The Gungan army was spread out all along the grasslands on either side of where he rode for as far as the eye could see. Bird-like, the Kadu picked their way through the tall grasses, heads dipping, Gungan riders swaying with the motion. The Gungans wore leather and metal headgear and body armor, with small circular shields strapped at their hips and triplate energy packs for abetting the force field jutting like metal feathers from their saddle backs. The Famba, bearing the shield generators, were spaced evenly down their lines to achieve maximum protection once the generators were activated. Like tanks, the massive lizards lumbered amidst the more nimble Kadu, and the grasslands shook with the weight of their passing. At the head of the army rode General Seal and his command unit, the flags of Utagunga and the other Gungan cities borne in their wake at the end of the long poles. The army crested a rise, a great rolling wave of dark bodies, and on a hand signal from General Seal, drew to a halt. Across a long, shallow depression, its position secure on the next ridge over, the Trade Federation army waited. Lines of STAPs and tanks formed the first rank, spread out over a distance of more than a kilometer, armor plating and weapons gleaming in the midday sun. Buttressing the smaller vehicles were the huge Federation transports, massive bodies hovering just off the ground, bulbous nose gates closed and pointed forward toward the Gungans. Battle droids controlled tanks and STAPs, faceless and empty metal shells, impervious to pain, devoid of emotion, and programmed to fight until destroyed. Jar Jar Binks stared at the droid army in awe. There was not a living creature in sight, not one made of flesh and blood, not one that would react to the terrible royal of battle as the Gungans would. It made his skin crawl to think of what that meant. The Famba were in place now, and General Seal activated the shield generators. The big turbines hummed to life, and a pulse of red light arced from a generator atop one Famba to a dish atop the next, the beam widening and broadening as it grew in size to encompass the whole of the Gungan army until each soldier and Kadu was safely enfolded. The coloring of the protective light changed from red to gold, shimmering like a mirage on a desert. The effect was to make it appear as if the Gungan army was underwater, as if it had been swallowed in a bright, clear sea. The Federation was quick to test the shield's effectiveness. On a signal from Droid Commander OOM-9, who in turn was responding to a command from the Deep Space Control Center, the tanks opened fire, their laser cannons sending round after round into the covering. Searing beams hammered into the shield and shattered ineffectively against the liquid energy surface, unable to penetrate. With their protective covering, the Gungans waited patiently, weapons ready, trusting the strength of their shield. Astride his Kadu, Jar Jar Binks flinched and squirmed fearfully, muttering various prayers to ward off the destruction he was certain would find him otherwise. Relentlessly, the Trade Federation cannons continued their attack, streamers of energy lancing from their barrel mounts, pounding at the covering. The flash and burn and explosion were blinding and deafening, but the Gungans held their ground. Finally, the Trade Federation guns went still. Try as they might, they could not break through the Gungan energy shield. Within their protective canopy, the Gungans cheered and brandished their weapons triumphantly. But now the tanks and STAPs withdrew, and the massive transports advanced to the fore. The rounded-nosed doors opened, widening to reveal a cluster of racks mounted within. The racks rolled forward on long rails, revealing row after row of battle droids neatly folded up and suspended on hooks. When the racks were finally extended, they began to lower and separate outward, filling the open space in front of the transports with thousands of droids. Positioned at the forefront of their army, General Seal and his Gungan commanders exchanged worried looks. Now the racks began to release the battle droids, who unfolded in unison into standing positions, arms and legs extended, bodies straight. Metal hands reached back over shoulders to pull free the blaster rifles with which each unit was equipped. On command from OOM-9, the entire array of battle droids began to march toward the Gungan army, bright metal ranks filling the grasslands from horizon to horizon. The Gungan shield wall was designed to deflect large, slow-moving objects of destiny and mass such as artillery vehicles and small, fast-moving objects generating extreme heat such as projectiles from weapons fire. But it would not deflect small, slow-moving droids, even massed together in such numbers as they were here. Jar Jar Binks began to wish he were somewhere else, thinking that as mighty as the Gungan army was, it was dwarfed by the metal machine that marched against it now. But the Gungans had come prepared for battle, and they were not so deterred by the number of their enemies that they were ready to quit. All up and down their lines, Gungans activated their energy spears and straight-handled slings, arming them for the attack. At the foot of the rise on which they waited, the front ranks of the battle droids reached the perimeter of the energy field and began to pass through. The shield had no effect on them. Lifting their blasters to their shoulders, they began to fire. Amid a wail of great curved battle horns, the Gungans retaliated. A shower of spears rained down on the advancing droids, shafts and points exploding on impact, ripping metal limbs and torsos apart. Energy balls flung from the slings followed, inflicting further damage. Mortars dumped their loads in the center of the droid ranks, opening huge gaps in the attack. The battle droids reeled and slowed, then regained momentum and came on, hundreds more taking the place of those who had fallen, marching mindlessly through the protective shield and into the range of the Gungan weapons. At the center of his command unit, General Seal urged his warriors on, tightening his defensive lines in front of the Famba and the shield generators to protect them from harm, knowing that if the force field came down, the Trade Federation's tanks would strike the Gungans as well. Battle droid ranks, metal parts reflecting sun and fire, and Gungan lines, orange-skinned and supple, closed to do battle. Resisting the temptation to shut his eyes against what he knew what was coming, Jar Jar Binks kicked his heels into the flanks of his Kadu and charged ahead with the rest of his command. In the relative seclusion of the Theed Palace throne room, in a place they had believed safely removed from any real danger, Newt Gunray and Rune Hako stared at a giant view screen and its rapidly changing images of the battle taking place in the main hangar. The Jedi Knights were inside the complex, accompanied by Naboo's soldiers and pilots, their lightsabers wreaking havoc on the battle droids who tried to stop them. "How did they get into the city?" Rune Hako whispered in dismay. Newt Gunray shook his head. "I don't know. I thought the battle was going to take place far from here." His eyes were wide and staring. "This is too close." They turned as one when Darth Maul stalked into the room, bearing a long-handled lightsaber. Yellow eyes gleamed out of the Sith's red and black tattooed face, and his dark cloak billowed out behind him. Newt Gunray and Rune Hako backed away instinctively, neither of them wanting to get in the way. "Lord Maul," Gunray greeted, inclining his head briefly. Darth Maul glanced at him disdainfully. "I told you there was more to this than was apparent." His eyes had a wild, manic look to them. "The Jedi have come to Theed for a reason, Viceroy. They have a plan of their own for defeating us." "A plan?" the Neimoidian asked worriedly. "One that will fail, I assure you." The striped face glinted wickedly in the light. "I have waited a long time for this. I have trained for it endlessly. The Jedi will regret the decision to return here." There was an edge to his rough voice that was frightening. The Sith was anxious for this confrontation, his body coiled and ready, his hands flexing about his weapon. The Neimoidians did not envy those he sought. "Wait here until I return," he ordered abruptly, and swept past them. "Where are you going?" Newt Gunray demanded frantically, as the Sith Lord crossed toward the speeder docks. "Where do you think I'm going, Viceroy?" the other sneered. "I'm going to the main hangar to rid you of the Jedi, once